With any new technology, I think there's only ever a very small percentage of people of the global population who ever truly understand it or have an interest in it. Um,
Mm,
and then they're the ones that create the products, services, um, marketing that propels that technology into the mainstream. In which case, the mainstream, they're just going to take what is given to them. Bitcoin is a very different view of the world. Low time preference just correlates with valuing your reputation,
mm,
maintaining integrity over time. So I kind of just see it as the more goodwill you can put out into the community, um, just the more opportunities that come your way, the higher the caliber of people you'll have access to. So
mm.
it sounds very selfless, but a lot of it's quite self-serving to me. I'm a big believer of putting out your portfolio of what you can do in public rather than trying to send out resumes or CVs to companies. Just demonstrate what you can do. Bitcoin's a industry that kind of grows by an order of magnitude every 4 to 5 years. So that's a
Mm.
great way to get a foot in the door. So everything I've released has always been free. You can buy print copies if you want, but everything is free in digital format. So I originally came from the music industry. I worked on the business side of things. Uh, there was a lot of disruption that came to that industry early on between, digitizing music to
Mm.
digitizing concert tickets. The whole business model got disrupted basically and flipped on its head. So that was a great eye opener for me to see just how quickly and severely these very entrenched industries can get shaken up.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Bitcoin for Professionals. Today, we speak with Anil Patel. Anil, welcome to the show.
Michelle, thank you for having me. Very excited to chat.
Thank you. Same here. I want to start. Obviously, you are extremely well known in the Bitcoin world. But for those watching the show who do not know you, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your career and background before doing what you do today?
Sure. So I started off creating educational Bitcoin content, mostly on Twitter. And then from there, I worked for a number of Bitcoin companies, including Swan, Unchained, Bitcoin Magazine. I became an active angel investor. So I'm a investor in probably a dozen Bitcoin related companies. And I've since released two books. One is kind of like a textbook, the Bitcoin Handbook, which kind of covers all the different mental models that are pretty useful to understand if you want to make sense of Bitcoin. And then I just released a book called The Treasury of Michael Saylor, kind of documenting his journey and the journey that Strategy is now pursuing.
And it's been extremely successful journey so far. We will get into that a bit later. I want to ask you though, before doing all this work in Bitcoin, simplifying the understanding of Bitcoin, what it is, what's the use case to the general public. Um, what was your career like before? Let's say I know you mentioned having an MBA. Like, what did you do before that?
So I originally came from the music industry. I worked on the business side of things. This was in Australia. And, there was a lot of disruption that came to that industry early on between, digitizing music to digitizing concert tickets to, how rights were negotiated. The whole business model got disrupted basically and flipped on its head. So that was a great eye opener for me to see just how quickly and severely these very entrenched industries can get shaken up. And that was kind of when I realized, okay, if I want to be anti-fragile, I should probably go and learn a bit more. So I went back to business school, and then that kind of sent me on a path, a deeper path than trying to understand, what money is at a foundational level. And if you're curious and open-minded enough, eventually you will find Bitcoin, and that's how I got there.
I'm curious to ask you, Anil. So many of us, and I love that the fact that you mentioned the word entrenched about big industry getting quickly disrupted. What is more entrenched in our lives than banks and the banking system? So many people don't even know or ask themselves what is money. Like, what made you kind of go through that route?
I was very fortunate. I happened to land or move to a city to go to business school that also happened to have the world's first Bitcoin ATM pretty much one street away, one block away. And I'd already
Hello
had,
to Montreal.
this was in Vancouver. It's actually in Vancouver.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of debate over which was the first. But, I moved to a city where there was already a well-established kind of Bitcoin ecosystem. There was
Hmm.
meetups, there was a university club, and this is in like 2013. I'd already had someone explain Bitcoin to me, probably a year prior. It didn't quite click. I mean, it sounded great in theory. Here is a, digital form of money. You can take it wherever you want. There's very little friction. And, that was very appealing to me. Anyone who has had to move countries with their assets, you intuitively understand the appeal of a censorship resistant permissionless network. And so initially, yeah, I mistook Bitcoin for a payments network, purely a payments network. I very much missed the store of value element. That definitely came later.
Okay, nice. And just for the anecdote, a friend of mine, I lived for 10 years in Montreal. I'm born and raised in Lebanon. And one of my friends used to work on a main commercial street, managing a store. And then right next to it was the first, I don't remember what it was called, Bitcoin Academy or something,
Oh
run
yes.
by Francis Pouliot and his friends.
Oh my goodness. Embassy, Bitcoin Embassy.
Yes, thank you. And I
Yes.
remember, like, obviously, my friend now has bought a bit of Bitcoin, and he used to tell me, like, I remember these guys would come in and like to ask, like, invite me to buy some Bitcoin just for $50, and like he would literally kick them out of the store. A pretty painful anecdote, but I think many of us have been there in a way or another. So it's interesting. You mentioned geographic mobility and how Bitcoin makes it easy to move your assets along. You mentioned Australia, and now you live in Canada. Have you lived elsewhere? And can you maybe share what has living in different countries taught you or shaped? What kind of values
Yeah,
it has shaped for you?
absolutely. I mean, so I was born in London. I'm also Indian, so I got some roots there. So yeah, like, anyone who has 3 to 4 to 5 different countries or ethnicities kind of mixed into them, you just get a broader view of how the world works, how it rebalances. Countries that are maybe ascending and countries that are maybe a bit on the decline. You can more easily see that.
Mm.
And there's a story that I learnt, as a young adult when my father kind of shared his story. He grew up in Uganda, and when he was a teenager, the government changed, and basically they had 30 to 60 days to leave. And, some with, some without their assets, and that
Wow.
just kind of hits home of you can get very complacent and very comfortable, but you never know how quickly things can change. And that's not to bring a whole doomer attitude to everything. You should definitely try to build a community where you are and have a long term view. But just
Uh-huh.
the appeal of something like Bitcoin then becomes very intuitive of why you might want a non sovereign, portable store of wealth.
Wow. Uh, yeah, I guess having to leave the place where you've lived in 30 days max. I mean, I live in the Middle East, so
Yeah.
it has happened and it is happening like as we speak. So I've been fortunate enough to discover Bitcoin while in Canada, a peaceful country where things worked, although some might argue that things were not working as well as maybe expected. But it's nice that you have also this global perspective on Bitcoin as a store of value, as a medium of exchange, as a protection against your lifelong's work. I want to ask you, through your creative mission, you have dedicated obviously a lot of time and effort to teach Bitcoin through simplicity, by building Bitcoin resources, whether books, slides, courses, and all of them are like fully open and accessible. You do not ask for any money. People can eventually pay whatever amount they want. Like, what has inspired you to take that route? And in our world today that's obsessed with monetizing everything and monetizing content,
Yep.
what replaces, I don't know, royalties or copyright for you?
Well, as you probably know, you know, uh, Bitcoin is a very different view of the world. They approach relationships differently. And low time preference just correlates with valuing your reputation,
Mm,
maintaining integrity over time. So I kind of just see it as the more goodwill you can put out into the community, um, just the more opportunities that come your way, the higher the caliber of people you'll have access to. So
mm,
it sounds very selfless, but a lot of it's quite self-serving to me. Initially when I was putting out a lot of educational content, it was to get a career. I wanted to work in Bitcoin. I wanted to leave my fiat job. And I'm a big believer of putting out your portfolio of what you can do in public rather than trying to send out resumes or CVs to companies. Just demonstrate what you can do. Bitcoin's a industry that kind of grows by an order of magnitude every 4 to 5 years. So that's a
mm.
great way to get a foot in the door. And so that was just a I guess, strategy I just kept on with. So everything I've released has always been free. You can buy print copies if you want, but everything is free in digital format.
And that's again probably some values that you've acquired through watching how the digital world totally revolutionized the music field while you were working there.
Yeah,
So can
absolutely.
you share a little bit about
Mm.
sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you're absolutely right. Initially you had bands, as a very well publicized case of Metallica trying to fight the streaming
Mm,
services early on, who felt their intellectual property was being infringed on. And it certainly was. But what they maybe didn't realize at the time was how beneficial it was to their brand. The fact that they are now still selling out stadiums to this day very easily because of that explosion. They were one of the artists that had such a big catalog when music
mm.
piracy kind of took off and then streaming took off. So yeah, you kind of miss, it's very messy short term. People don't understand what the long-term implications of something like that are. And the same thing's happening now with Bitcoin. So yeah.
What something I love about your slides, your content. First of all, it's not very busy. Slides are very simple. They look very nice, very polished, but it's just easy to grasp the message that you're trying to convey. Can you share a little bit about your creative process when you're creating content like this, and how does it change whether you're building a slide, building a keynote, or writing a book?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first off, my early work was not very good. It was very messy. It was very complex. And the great thing about Bitcoin is they will give you feedback if you're open to it.
Mm,
So,
mm.
you take on board feedback, you iterate, you iterate, you iterate, and then eventually you end up with something that maybe is the best version it can be. And I'm a big believer in simplicity. I love stripping away anything that's unnecessary. And, anyone who's tried to explain Bitcoin regularly over many years, you understand that you kind of really only get like one shot you have to really simplify and condense a message. So you've got to be very targeted, very concise, very clear. Um, and that just translates then into everything I make. So yeah, it's just a process of iteration.
Okay. And so something that you've touched on now is just how difficult it can be to orange pill people, to show them, despite, let's say, how logical or how easy Bitcoin's value proposition is, no matter where you live in the world, no matter what your circumstances are, there's this weird reticence about just having the open mind to, or maybe taking the time to dig a bit deeper. Um, what makes it so hard, do you think?
Well, yeah, you probably have just as good of an idea about that as I do in your line of work. So, I mean, look, you work on multi institutional custody in geographically separated places, right? It Who would not want their wealth to be stored that way if they weren't able to custody it themselves? It's just that is the ideal,
Mm.
right? So to think that you have to actually sell people on that is just mind-boggling, and it just speaks to how few people are actually thinking from first principles. They're just defending their own choices that they've already made that are entrenched, and new things are scary for people.
Right.
They don't understand the risks. They don't understand the technology. They don't understand volatility as a part of monetization. So it's unfortunate, but a lot of people will just be late.
And talking about volatility, you have launched recently your new book. Congratulations. It's The Treasury of Michael Saylor, probably the person with one of the most famous quotes on volatility. Can you tell us a little bit about the book, how it came about, who is it for, and what do you want your readers to take away from?
Absolutely. So I create a lot of educational content, and I noticed several years back that a larger portion of the content was coming from one person, and that was Michael. And I realized that, what would I want as a consumer of Bitcoin content? And I really would like a book of his lessons and teachings, because he kind of spans a whole range. He doesn't just talk about Bitcoin. He draws in engineering, he draws in history. So he is very public about saying one of the careers he wish he had was becoming a professor. And so he has this whole catalog and arsenal of all these stories and analogies that he was very primed to understand Bitcoin because of it. And so I think that's why he's become such an effective communicator, is because he's constantly able to draw on all these different historical lessons, analogies, his own career, seeing, 30 to 40 years of technology, especially in the public markets. So this book was really, I wrote it for myself, but I figured there are a lot of people out there like me who would also enjoy it. And ultimately, the point is just to take someone from a lot of Bitcoin books are taking people from A to B, which is, you don't understand Bitcoin. Hopefully now you understand it. This book was trying to take people from A to B to C. So you don't understand Bitcoin. Hopefully now you understand Bitcoin. Now you might understand why companies are adopting Bitcoin. So that was the ultimate goal. And it's just a collection of transcripts that, from interviews he's given over the years. And I just tried to condense it down to make it as clear as possible. So it's very difficult to argue against why someone would do this.
Nice. Where is it available for purchase? Obviously, you said it's available online for free, but how can
Yeah,
somebody get a copy?
if you head
Hard
to the
copy?
treasuryofsailor.com, you can buy physical copies through Amazon. If you want to pay in Bitcoin, you can do that through Consensus, which is a great Bitcoin publisher. And then, as mentioned, the digital version you can just download for free on that side as well.
Nice. Can you share some of the feedback that you've gotten about the book? Maybe one or two that particularly pleased you?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm a pretty big critic of myself, so the feedback's been overwhelmingly positive. I've been absolutely shocked by how receptive people have been to it. And I was at a conference not too long ago, and someone came up to me and they're like, "It's a great book," and I'm like, "Yeah, thank you." And they're like, "No, it's really good." I'm like, "Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that." Like, "No, you don't get it. It's an amazing book." I'm like, "Yes, I know. I spent a year trying to make this the perfect book." Like, the bar was very high for me. So I'm really grateful that people are enjoying it. And the great thing about Twitter is you get the opportunity to test content out. So a lot of the content in the book is stuff that I'd already put out on Twitter, saw that people were comprehending it. It was, maybe a bit entertaining or enjoyable to consume. And that was kind of the bar of would it make it into the book or not. So, it was just very fortunate.
Michael Saylor was definitely one of the forces that guided me through my own orange pilling journey. I just loved listening to him speak. Obviously, he can speak for for a very a very long time, but he says things that made so much sense as an engineer, mentioning first principles thinking, and like you said, blending so many different aspects of life, history, thermodynamics, etc., money, blood. He would speak of an athlete getting his blood drained and compare inflation to that. How can you perform? You're not going to win any medals. You're lucky to just stay alive. And let's say around 2020, 2021, I think everybody loved Michael Saylor. Like, he was the Bitcoin rock star. Everybody loved him on Twitter. Lately, I've seen some more, a bit of hate even, which goes to show how difficult it is to be also a public figure, how people sometimes can, and I'm not saying that everybody that criticizes Michael Saylor is stupid, but some perspectives that you read on Twitter are completely retarded. How do you think, like, how much does the Bitcoin Treasury company and all the products, the financial products and access to capital markets that Michael Saylor has, how do you think that has played into potentially morphing him in the view of other Bitcoiners as like more of a fallen hero because he's playing the fiat game?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if you look at any primary figure in any movement, they definitely go through an arc, right? First, they're, they appear and everyone is very grateful and rooting for them and thinking, oh, this is the person. And then they do something that maybe conflicts with your own views of what is either right or correct or appropriate. And then they kind of, their image gets turned. And Michael's had multiple decades in the public markets. This isn't his first rodeo, so he's well aware that he's going to be talked about, both positively and negatively. So I don't think it phases him. I think he just knows it's part of the process. And you have to understand, like, he's also lived through massive volatility in not just public markets, but his own stock price and his own personal wealth. So he understands, like, taking a long-term view, and you have to ride things out. So in my opinion, I don't think he's really deviated from the strategy that he first laid out and strategy's management team first laid out of, we are going to acquire as much Bitcoin as possible in an accretive way. And whether or not that reflects in the, public market stock price, that's, I don't think they have much control over that. So if you look at a lot of the projections that he makes in public speeches, not about stock price, but just about Bitcoin in general, he's always looking 20, 30 years out. So I think that's still the horizon point for him. And there's just going to be a lot of noise between now and then.
For sure. And like you said, yeah, I don't think Michael Saylor cares much about what people on Twitter are talking about him. But it was just interesting. Potentially in 2020, 2021, he had the ears of more of retail investors who hailed him, as the guy from Wall Street who kind of gets us and who gets decentralization, etc. Yeah, like, I feel that right now, and not that it's a fault, but through executing his vision for strategy, he's speaking more to institutions, to corporations. And this maybe angers some NPCs sitting behind their screen. But I just thought it was interesting. As you said, he has not deviated. He's always been clear. And I think this is one of the main reasons my strategy is the top Bitcoin treasury company, because the vision was clear, is still clear, and it's being executed to perfection. I want to ask you, because now that we're mentioning the inevitable topic of Bitcoin treasury companies, like, what do you think of, say, Strategy is the trailblazer, and they've now acquired through their access to capital market more than 3% of the total Bitcoin supply. You think of Metaplanet, very successive as well in terms of their stock price. Um, um, that I link, let's say they are in Japan, capital gains on Bitcoin in Japan is huge. I don't think everybody in Japan maybe can buy US stocks. So kind of this is their market there. What are all the other Bitcoin strategy companies in the US doing? Like, what is their moat? What is their market? Since you already have a very successful one.
That's a really good question, and I don't have a good answer. I would encourage people, so Michael Saylor wrote a book in 2012 called The Mobile Wave, and in that book he kind of lays out the how there will be one dominant player in all these digital applications. Get news, search, video, what have you. And so I think he's very conscious of the fact, and he's actually stated that he thinks there's room for one Bitcoin bank. I think he was maybe referring to the US market specifically, but in my mind, strategy has already won. I don't believe anyone in the US will catch them. And for that reason, I really don't pay attention to any other treasury companies in the US. Some might be successful, some might not. I'm not sure. But I think he understood that, there's going to be one dominant player. And he's been iterating, the team's been iterating as much as possible to try to, fine tune and find the right way to acquire as much Bitcoin as possible in an accretive way. And I think the race is over. It's very early to call, but I think they will be the one. And yeah, it's hard to comprehend where the roof might be for them in terms of market cap, just because of how many pools of capital they're able to tap into simultaneously. And they're always looking for new ways to tap into different pools. So the largest pools right now, I think Strategy have an advantage in terms of accessing them. And again, none of this is financial advice. I'm just looking at purely through game theory.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not sure what the other companies in the US will do.
And I appreciate your also very candid answers, Anil. I guess some people maybe don't like to talk about these things, so I really appreciate you being very, very chill about it. So again, I suppose you've met Michael Saylor many times. You've worked with him. You've met and you've worked with very high caliber people in the Bitcoin world. I think about Jeff Booth, for example. Can you share something that you've learned from these people, whether about long-term thinking, first principle thinking, conviction, or anything else for the matter?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, so Jeff Booth also used to live in the same city I live in Vancouver, and he was very kind to write the foreword to my first book. And I've only met Jeff a couple of times, actually, because he's always traveling, but he's just a very gracious, optimistic, and open person. And so anytime I'm on Twitter, and actually, one of Michael's, he has these 21 rules that he always refers to, and he talks about being, I want to find the exact term he uses. Oh my goodness, I can't find it. But it's basically like, don't be a jerk. There's nothing to be gained from being a jerk. Yeah. You might think you're being funny or clever, but it won't benefit you in the long term. So I kind of always think of those two people. You're about to post something online, and it just makes you stop and think, like, is this actually helping anyone? Probably not. You're only going to turn people against you. They're going to be, have more of a barrier to getting Bitcoin in the future. Nobody's going to win from this. So, cheerful and constructive. That's what I was trying to remember. Cheerful and constructive.
Yeah. Nice. So I've learned, obviously, Jeff Booth, his book was, I've read his book, The Price of Tomorrow. I still recommend it to people. One of my good friends is reading it now, so I'm excited to also maybe exchange and see what his views are on the book. So all of these people, by being cheerful and constructive, have helped me understand Bitcoin, I think, much quicker than I would have if people were, like you said, being jerks, whether on the internet or in real life. And throughout my journey, so I've learned about so many concepts. So, while studying Bitcoin, Metcalfe's law, the Triffin dilemma, the Overton window. Like I hadn't heard of none of these things. You often reference Amara's law. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah. So again, going back to first principles, like my first book, the Bitcoin Handbook, it's just 50 first principles that would be useful to someone trying to
Hmm.
understand Bitcoin or wrap their head around it. And Amara's law is just another one that's kind of helpful to understand why things take longer than they should or they feel like they should. And the reason is we think linearly in terms of how technologies should evolve and mature and be adopted. You know, that's how humans think, and that's deeply flawed because that's absolutely not how technology evolves. You know, technology goes in these waves, in these boom and bust cycles. Capital gets overexcited and then it pulls back, and there's an underinvestment. So you're always going to go through periods where you're overestimating what a technology will do, and then you go through a period where you're underestimating the impact a technology will have. And so, you know, I kind of believe we're now entering a phase where we're underestimating Bitcoin's impact. Because as technology evolves, also a lot of new use cases get unlocked that we cannot possibly foresee or predict. So Amara's law kind of just helps describe that you're always going to think in a linear fashion, but technology is absolutely not that. So prepare to be surprised, both to the upside and the downside.
Nice. Um, this made me think of Jesse Myers. He used to write a newsletter, and I think also I owe him a lot of gratitude for his content that Orange built me. He would compare the internet built over the protocol that is TCP/IP, and where you could take advantage of the internet and own stocks, let's say, of companies built on the internet on this layer. You couldn't own a part of the layer itself. Whereas in Bitcoin, you have the protocol, you have the asset that you can buy, and then you have all these products and use cases that you just mentioned. We just have no idea what they can be or look like, but you can already own a stake of everything that's going to be built on Bitcoin. I thought that was extremely powerful. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I completely agree. Jesse's also a great educator, a great communicator of explaining things
Yeah.
visually that are hard to grasp. And when you understand that in order to use the Bitcoin network, you need to own the asset Bitcoin. That's what is
Yeah.
natively transacted over the network. Um, and when you have a finite uh, currency like Bitcoin, and this goes back to Jeff Booth's kind of thesis in that when you have abundant money, it's going to chase scarce assets because the money cannot hold value. And when you
Yeah.
have a finite money, well, now people are incentivized to create abundance in previously scarce things so that they can store the wealth in that scarce money. So you have one
Mhm.
side, it's very pessimistic, downward spiral, one side, very optimistic. Um, and yeah, so to Jesse's point, owning Bitcoin, you're betting basically that humanity is going to continue to innovate and life will get better through technology. And if you don't believe that, stick to fiat. So yeah, would you want to have a share or share in the output of all of humanity's ingenuity forever? I would. So yeah, it's a great argument.
And many Bitcoiners often say, as a reply or as a comment, they would say things like, "Few understand," or "We are still early." Um, how would you describe the current state of adoption of Bitcoin adoption globally, and what kind of signs would maybe convince you that we are no longer early, or more people actually do understand?
With any new technology, I think there's only ever a very small percentage of people of the global population who ever truly understand it or have an interest in it. Um,
Mm.
and then they're the ones that create the products, services, marketing that propels that technology into the mainstream, in which case the mainstream, they're just going to take what is given to them, and unfortunately that might be a pre-packaged fund from BlackRock in their pension,
Yeah.
which they didn't really seek out and choose. It was delivered to them. And, you get this messy period during a transition where people who are critics of something still might unknowingly be using that technology.
Yeah.
Which, happened with the internet, happened with telephones, happened with the railroads. This is nothing new. So I don't believe anything more than a very small population, but a small percentage of the population will ever truly understand Bitcoin. But for the mainstream, the decisions will be made elsewhere, and then they will use that technology through that.
Yeah, and that is why BlackRock, Strategy, and like all these companies are literally hoarding Bitcoin. Um, if we position ourselves more on the sovereign game theory side of things, and outside of obviously El Salvador and Bhutan, who's been publicly mining Bitcoin with their hydropower, Abu Dhabi earlier in the year disclosing owner exposure to Bitcoin ETF. When do you think we might hear of, let's say, officially a sovereign country that will officially state that yes, we are acquiring Bitcoin, or yes, we are mining Bitcoin and we are keeping the Bitcoin? Do you see it happening in maybe 2026?
That is a question that is way too advanced for me. Michelle, you probably have a better idea based on where you are in the world of what's going to be happening. But I definitely can say that, throughout history, it's usually the jurisdictions and the countries with the most to lose, or sorry, the least to lose, who will take the most risk, and then we'll see the most benefit should that technology be adopted or should a certain thesis play out. So I'm sure we will see some kind of reordering, maybe not at a superpower level, but definitely in the, countries numbered 5 to 50, there could be big shifts in terms of, GDP per capita, quality of life, leverage in trade relations. So yeah, it's a very, very exciting time.
For sure. So now maybe to the sobering part. Obviously, Bitcoin is great. It can help your life in so many different ways, but it would totally suck to lose whatever Bitcoin you might have acquired in the past. So what are your views on Bitcoin custody? Obviously, lots of people, they get it, but they prefer to buy an ETF because they don't want to lose their keys, which I get, but is also in a way kind of antithetical to one of Bitcoin's use cases as sovereign money or a bearer asset. Can you maybe talk us through your personal journey with Bitcoin custody, and what are your views today on custody in general?
Yeah, well, I'm very fortunate. So, Canada has its downsides, but it also has its upsides. And going back to, say, toxic maxis, um, we're fortunate to have people like Francis and Bull Bitcoin in Canada, and, NVK and CoinKite based in Canada. And you've got, Ben, BTC Sessions based in Canada. So you've got education, you've got exchange, you've got custody solutions all in one jurisdiction, which is pretty cool. And, in my opinion, those are some of the highest caliber products and people and companies you can have. So you kind of have the full stack available to you, or I do. So I always err on the side of caution. And my view is that if I'm not confident someone can self-custody their Bitcoin in a secure way, but they want to allocate, I would still prefer they had some exposure, even if it's wrapped up in an ETF, versus having no Bitcoin exposure at all, because they might not understand self-custody. And that's where the line between being a friend versus a financial advisor gets really blurry. Is early on, and maybe the same thing happened for you, where if you're the Bitcoin person in your circle of friends, well, you end up finding out that, oh, you're the person custodying Bitcoin for other people, which is a terrible security risk. And also, if something happens to you or you make an error, well, you've kind of ruined it for everyone and you might ruin friendships in the process. So, I'd always advise people not to custody
Yeah.
Bitcoin for their friends, no matter how noble it might sound. Um, and if you're not completely confident in self-custodying Bitcoin for yourself, see what, the next best option to gain exposure is. That said, self-custody is not hard. It really isn't. It's intimidating because, there's a lot of work to do on the educational side, but everyone has the capacity to self-custody Bitcoin. If you have an email address, if you have a cell phone plan, like you can do this. So don't be intimidated. The resources are out there. Go figure it out. Test out your setup regularly. And as your confidence builds, then maybe, you will acquire more and more Bitcoin to put into that setup. So yeah, that's my view.
Thank you also for reminding everyone that Canada is a Bitcoin powerhouse through all these entrepreneurs and builders. Canada does get a lot of bad publicity lately, but also there's some great things happening there. I want to touch a bit about the technical about the technical side of Bitcoin. Running nodes, mining. Even to me, these are aspects of Bitcoin that I don't completely still understand, as well as how does a hardware wallet work. I suppose I don't need to understand because I drive a car and I don't really understand how all the moving pieces also work. But driving a car is something, owning safeguarding your wealth is something else. Can you maybe share a little bit also about, what do you think of all this technical aspects and how accessible it can be, or how intimidating it can be to people getting into Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, if we just take the products that are out there today and the educational resources that are out there today, and even go back just 5 years, not even a decade, but 5 years
Yeah.
ago, people entering Bitcoin today are at such a massive advantage in terms of, the UX, the UI of hardware wallets, and then finding the resources to guide them. Now, it's very noisy. As you can go down hundreds of different routes that will take you to terrible places, on crypto YouTube. But if you know what you want, if you've done the work and you understand what you need, um, you can find it. Um, so what? Yeah, I think as someone's net worth or a greater percentage of their net worth goes into Bitcoin, they are more incentivized to understand all the different aspects. And now it's easier than ever. You can buy a nerd miner or a BitAxe for a few $100 and then mine in your own house. You're probably not going to win a block. You could contribute to a pool, but it will give you a great understanding of how mine works. 5 years ago, you had to actually go and buy an ASIC.
Right.
There weren't all these new solutions, or you've got the bit heater where it's built into a heater. So that's if you want to understand mining. Um, and then with hardware wallets, it used to be just pretty much Trezor and Ledger kind of had this duopoly, and then CoinKite with the Cold Card was kind of like this fringe option. And now you look at all the different options you have with the Blockstream Jade and what have you. There are a lot of great Bitcoin only hardware wallets, and I say Bitcoin only very intentionally in that if you're looking at your different choices across wallets and something supports Bitcoin and 1,000 different other cryptos, just think of the attack vectors on that device. A device that serves 1,000 different applications versus one that is single purpose, Bitcoin only. Which one is going to have more risks to it? So that's how you kind of start thinking. So as you allocate more to Bitcoin and you keep learning, you will be incentivized to understand all the other aspects of it, from mining to running a node. And then you look at, the products in the node space. I'm an investor in Umbrel and Start9. Totally different strategies. But at the end of the day, more people are running nodes than ever in their own home, and they're, interacting with Bitcoin in a very sovereign way. So yeah, I think it's a a great time, and it's only going to get better.
I love your answer, and I love that you always seem to be looking forward. And you're saying 5 years ago how different things were, and with the compounding of technology, you can expect that maybe in 3 years we're gonna have much easier, much safer, much newer alternatives. So this is something that is exciting. That makes me excited to for the future. I always tell my friends when I moved back from Canada to Lebanon, I mean, Lebanon is a great country in of itself because it's a beautiful place and because like it's my birth country and all of my memories are here. But it's also a very complicated country that is not always functional in terms of what a citizen also can expect from their country. I know people will say, think of what you can do to your country, not only what your country can do for you, but still, Lebanon as well sits in a very beautiful but complicated area of the world. That has become like this, in my opinion, and largely because of fiat that enables endless wars. But this is a conversation for another day. I want to be mindful of your time, Anil. So 2 more questions for you before we wrap it up. What are you personally excited specifically about in the Bitcoin world in the coming years?
I would say nothing in particular. I just hope more and more people start to save in Bitcoin, and then that wealth compounds so that they can then focus on the things they actually want to focus on, rather than stuck on this fiat hamster wheel. So yeah, in my mind, the greater that Bitcoin is adopted as a savings technology, the greater human flourishing will be, because more people will actually be working on the things they would if they didn't have, financial constraints, or that kind of stress in their lives.
Okay. And for you as well, besides Bitcoin and besides creating content, what else are you passionate about? What else do you enjoy doing?
At the moment, hanging out with my kids. Ultimately, that's what savings
Nice.
are for. Yeah. That, hopefully you could
How
use
old are they?
it to buy back your time. I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So, kind of trying to minimize future regret when you understand that this is a very special point in life. Yeah. So just trying to maximize time with them.
All of these new parents who have kids, even teenagers should really be stacking as hard as they can for their kids, for themselves, but for their kids as well, because their kids hopefully will have the gift of time, like you said, and they can take advantage of, like you said as well, doing more of what they like when the right time comes. Anil, thank you so much for taking the time today. Thank you for sharing your optimism and your insight as well with us.
Michelle, thanks for the invitation, and thanks for the chat. Hope to see you at a conference one day.
Would love that. Thank you. Cheers, Anil.
Cheers.